All right, I have 3:35-ish on Wednesday, June 28th, 2023. This is the June meeting of the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board. This time, I will ask for a roll call, please.
Barnes. Chaplin.
Yes.
Delgado. Casella.
Present.
Hannon.
Here.
Nudo.
Here.
Dial.
Present. We have a quorum.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. First item is approval of our agenda for today's meeting. It's been moved and seconded to approve our agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Our first item is a public hearing on the Budget and Appropriation Ordinance for fiscal year 2024. I probably have some note here that I'm supposed to read. Maybe. Here it is. The primary purpose of this hearing is to receive input from the public on the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget and appropriation ordinance for the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District for the period from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024. Beginning on May 28th, 2023, copies of the tentative budget were made available for public inspection on the district's website, mtd.org, under the Public Hearings Document tab. The notice of public hearing appeared in the News Gazette on May 28th, and the affidavit of publication is available for inspection. Are there any comments from the public on the MTD's proposed budget and appropriation ordinance for 2024? If so, please approach the table at the front, state your name and address. This is an opportunity to make a statement to the Board of Directors as a whole. We do not take questions. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Any comments from the public on the budget ordinance? Going once. Seeing none, at this time, I declare the public hearing on the MTD's budget and appropriation ordinance as closed. Our next item is audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board on any other topic? Okay, moving on to the approval of minutes for our board meeting, open session, May 31st, 2023. After your review, a motion and second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the open session, May 31st, 2023. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Communications. Communications, Carl. Any communications from the board that you've received in the last month? None. We'll start into reports from the managing director.
Thank you, Chair. This report and these statistics are for May of 2023. So it's the penultimate month for fiscal year 2023, our year of recovery. There were almost 551,000 rides in May, and this is up 14% from May of 2022. That's for the month, and the year-to-date ridership is up almost 16%, and so that's looking real good. We still have a month to go, and our year-to-date ridership has exceeded what our total ridership was last year. So this month's ridership, June, which we'll report on next month, that's all gravy. That's all improvement over last year's ridership. So that's great news. The recovery continues. I do want to point out on this May ridership by year chart, I had an error on that chart. For 2023, it indicates 586,920 rides, but the number that I just said earlier, and that is in the rest of the sheet of 550,987, is the correct number. So apologies for that. We'll get that corrected and posted on the website. So, moving on, and speaking of errors, and tech team, I'm sorry we didn't have time to get a correction to you, but I'm going to say this out loud, that this chart here also is incorrect. What we, the numbers, actually, every number on here is incorrect, so I apologize, but I think, board members, you've got a corrected chart in front of you, so I'll say it out loud, that the FY 2023 operating revenue is actually $731,296, and the FY 2022 number is $570,813. So that is actually an increase of 28%, which is better than the numbers on here. We're not cooking the books, but I don't know, I can't even tell you why. I can only accept responsibility because I put the numbers in here, but wow, I just got the numbers wrong, and I can't even tell you exactly why or how. So apologies, but we do have a corrected chart that will be in the board packet on the website, and of course you have the corrected number in front of you. Moving on to the year-to-date, my error continued onto this part, but the FY 2022 number is actually $9,089,314. The FY 20, sorry, the FY 22 number is $8,348,917. The FY 23 number is $9,089,314. So that is an increase on a year-to-date basis of 9%. Now, we can move on from my embarrassing mistakes and look at expenses, and I got the numbers correct on the report. And so the May operating expenses were 9.9% above May of 2022, and the year-to-date operating expenses were 7.2% above FY 2022. Moving on to the revenues and expenses as compared to the budget, our year-to-date operating revenues were almost $1.2 million above budget, and that is with the correct numbers. And the operating expenses were $6.4 million below budget. So, let's see where I am. I think. I just want to close out the report by saying you may have seen in the newspaper or on some of the broadcast stations yesterday and the day before that we were awarded a low-no grant. And as you recall, we submitted 2 low-no grants, one for the no emission, the zero emission program, and one for the low emission program, and that was for hybrids. We were not awarded the zero emission grant to expand the hydrogen production station and buy additional hydrogen buses, but we were awarded out of the low emission side of the grant program to get 10 replacement hybrid buses. And so these 10 buses will replace 10 2011 buses, which are some of our first generation hybrid buses that we still have. And while they were a great improvement over pure diesel buses, the current generation of hybrid buses are an order of magnitude better than that first generation. So I know Josh and maintenance are very excited that we'll be able to accelerate the replacement of the 2011 fleet of buses that we have, so we're moving forward with that. And with that, I will take any questions through page 34 on my report.
Questions for Carl on his report?
On these new hybrid buses, what is the miles per gallon?
It's about a 40 to 50% improvement on fuel consumption, and that translates into like a 7 or 8 miles per gallon. Is that right? Miles per gallon? Yeah. So 7 or 8 miles per gallon, which is about twice as good as what a pure diesel bus is. And it uses 40 to 50% less fuel.
Additional questions on Carl's report? All right. Seeing none, we will move into our action items, the first one of which is ordinance number 2023-1, adoption of budget and appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2024. Any board comment? We've all seen this a number of times. I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve our budget and appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2024. It's been moved and seconded to approve the ordinance number 2023-1, the adoption of budget and appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2024. That'll be a roll call, please.
Chaplin.
Yes.
Fasella.
Yes.
Hannan.
Yes.
Nudo. Dial.
Yes, that motion carries. Our next item is the annual update to the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Brendan Sennett, Safety and Training Director, and today for your review and approval is our annual revision to the district's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. The updates for this year are quite minimal when compared to years past. You may have heard about additional requirements coming from the bipartisan infrastructure deal from last year, but we were able to incorporate all those changes into last year's revision. So this one, again, very minimal. We have some title changes that were triggered with updates to the organizational chart. We updated our safety performance targets, the rolling 5-year average of the last 5-year window. And we've also improved a process to support safety assurance within the district. This plan was submitted to FTA's Technical Assistance Center for a compliance review, and again, no major changes, just some minor tweaks to strengthen our compliance with the CFR.
All right, any questions on this item for safety and training? Seeing none, we'll ask for a motion and a second on this item. It's been moved and seconded to approve the annual update for the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks.
Thank you.
That was quick. All right, our next item is the CCART's Intergovernmental Agreement.
All right, sorry, Jay Rank, Operations Director. I'm here to seek approval to authorize the Managing Director to sign an intergovernmental agreement between MTD and Champaign County to operate CCARTs for the next 3 years. So this intergovernmental agreement has been in place since 2014 and basically defines, how we operate, including the leasing of the office parking spaces, the rates for MTD staff time, assigned responsibilities, and the regulatory tasks. So this is very similar to years past, except an updated cost for the maintenance and to reflecting the labor and parts increases. And then, yeah, it has been extended. Previously, it was 1 year. We're doing a 3-year period now from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2026. And this agreement was approved by the county board at their June 22nd meeting. So if we don't get approval, CCARTs won't operate beyond June 30th. So we're looking to extend.
Questions for Jay on this agreement? Seeing none, we'll ask for a motion and a second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the Champaign County Area Rural Transit System Intergovernmental Agreement for a 3-year period. All in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. Next item is the C-Carts Vehicle Lease Agreement. Jay.
Okay, yes, very similar. We're looking to get approval for the managing director to sign a lease agreement on behalf of MTD with Champaign County to lease the vehicles for a 3-year period. So the only thing that's changed in previous years is the time frame again is a 3-year period. And again, this was approved by Champaign County's board at their June 22nd meeting. So the disadvantage of not extending this would be that we would have no vehicles to operate beyond June 30th. So.
Margaret, go ahead.
This is just an information question. Do they present us with the list of vehicles, or do we give them our list and they say, okay, we'll get them for you? Or I guess, how is it decided what vehicles to buy? Would these be the vehicles that you would buy for the MTD?
Well, these are the vehicles that the county owns that we're leasing for $1. So this is the exact same lease agreement as we've had in years past. So presumably we'd have to update it when we get new vehicles, but as it stands now, it's exactly the same.
But the county decides what vehicles to buy.
You want me to take it?
Sure.
Yeah, we work together on it in terms of the number of vehicles that we need to provide the level of service that they are asking for and that the residents of Champaign County, that the demand calls for. And then they, meaning the county, essentially order the vehicles through the state's Consolidated Vehicle Procurement Program. We just call it the CVP. And so these are federally and state-funded vehicles, and MTD also gets vehicles through that program, but C-Carts gets those vehicles, and then we just, new vehicles, we take old vehicles off and we put new vehicles on the list, but they order the vehicles, they own the vehicles, but we work collaboratively on the number of vehicles.
I was just curious as to sort of how the decisions were made as to what vehicles to buy and whether the MTD has been satisfied with the vehicles these people.
What type of vehicle?
No, just anything in general. I know this. Sorry. I know that we're somewhat restricted because of the Made in USA kind of stuff, so.
Yeah.
These are all Ford vehicles. But I guess I want to make sure that we're not just presented with something we have to sign off on, that we have some decision-making or some inputs to make sure that these are vehicles that we want to run.
Sure,
that we
sure.
think they are appropriate for the duties that they're supposed to take care of.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the collaborative conversation that we have with the county before they order the vehicles, although you're right, the Buy America requirements are pretty restrictive about what vehicles would even be available to order, and then the state's CVP availability, that restricts it even more. So I think it's basically 2 vehicles are available, and the only difference between them are the sizes of them, so the number of passengers that they can carry, and so that's a pretty easy decision to make. We essentially get the larger of the 2 sizes, and that's the extent of the options we can do.
Bruce.
Do you have any idea how well this county service works? How many people use it?
Yeah, I'll grab that one too, because Margaret also asked, I think actually now it's been 2 months ago, for ridership information relative to C-Carts. So I'm going to begin providing that to you. We had some turnover with the management and leadership on our side of C-Carts, and so the new person, right when Margaret asked that was right when Clint started, and so she has been putting together, she and and Jay have been putting together the stats in a format that you're used to, that are similar to what we have with the MTD ridership, and I'll be giving that to you on a regular basis.
Phil?
And we are compensated for the maintenance on these, right?
Yes.
That's important because it
Yeah.
looks like they're all Fords.
Yeah, so that's defined in this first intergovernmental agreement.
All right. Additional questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, we'll ask for a motion and a second to approve this. It's been moved and seconded to approve the Champaign County Area Regional Transit System Vehicle Lease Agreement between the MTD and Champaign County. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Thanks, Jay.
Brad, may I?
Go ahead.
I was just reminded that part of this Low-No grant process, and we got the award for the 10 hybrid buses. I was just reminded, we did actually receive some additional vehicles, and C-Carts also received a vehicle through that, and that is, Bruce, you will be all a Twitter with excitement to hear this, that we're going to get our first battery electric vehicles, because the two that we're getting and the one that C-Carts will be getting, the vans, are battery electric vans. So we'll be getting the vehicles and the charging systems for that through the state via the Federal Transit Administration's Low-No program.
What make are the fully electric vans?
Unknown, at least unknown to me. I can't answer that question yet. I think that the state has to go through, or they will have to go through a whole bidding process. They just got the grant award, so they've got to write the specifications for it. They're going to have to go to bid for it, and then they'll give the vehicles to us. I will say we're not. I'm sure they'll solicit some input from us, but yeah, this is a statewide program. Transit systems all across the state are getting these, so we're just one participant out of many.
You don't want to look at gift card.
Absolutely.
So where are the buses stored?
I think that Josh, our maintenance director, also wants to know the answer to that question. And fortunately, we have time to figure it out, but that is something that we'll have to figure out. They'll be in our storage facility because we'll get the vans before our maintenance annex is constructed because we did not get awarded that money either for that project. So we'll go back and put another proposal. But yeah, we'll figure out where to store them. We haven't done that yet.
Shut myself off. Our next item is a line of credit extension with Prospect Bank. Michelle.
Michelle Wright, I'm the finance director, and we are, we have a $10 million line of credit and a $6 million line of credit, and they both end June 30th. And we generally go through a RFP process to get new line of credit availability. But to make sure that we were able to do that properly, along with our next item of business is the audit RFP. Doing those at the same time proved problematic for us keeping up to date with everything else we're doing. So what we've had here from Prospect Bank is an offer to extend the $10 million line of credit, and that would be extended until October 1st. So prior to that time of the September board meeting or before, we will have completed an RFP process, and we'll come with a suggestion of going forward beyond October 1st. But for now, the proposal is to extend the line of credit, the $10 million only. The $6 million will expire. The $10 million would be extended then through October 1st. The interest rate would stay the same at 2.625%. Which is an excellent rate compared to, I think, the 8.25% prime rate I read about today. But there will be a $2,500 fee for that extension. And so I'm asking for approval to go ahead with the extension.
Questions on this item from the board? Seeing none, we'll ask for a motion and a second to extend the $10 million line of credit.
I would second Bruce's motion.
It's been moved and seconded to approve an agreement with Prospect Bank for a loan extension in the quantity of $10 million until October. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Our next item is the financial audit services contract. Michelle.
So every 5 years or so, we go out for bid for audit services as recommended by FTA and pretty much everybody that wants to make sure that you're getting a good look at what's available as far as services. So we were supposed to have gone through that last year, but due to COVID, we did not have sufficient opportunity to do the RFP process. We have now completed that, and even though we contacted directly 12 different audit firms and put out our general RFP as we always do, we only had one proposal received, and that was from Baker Tilly. And Baker Tilly is well known as an auditor of governments, and so I don't have any question about their qualifications to do it. But they have proposed to do the next 5 years of audits, and the fees listed are there on page 119 of the board packet. There's some variable in fees depending on what decisions we make about what services we want. Some, I guess, will be our decisions and some will be the government's decisions. Right now, we do a standard audit. That's what we have done in the past. I would like to comply with the requirements to submit our audit for the Government Finance Officers Association Excellence in Program. Excellence in Financial Reporting Program. So if we chose to do that, we would require Baker Tilly's assistance in complying with those requirements. Depending on how much federal money we receive, that is what it triggers whether we have to pay for single audit or not. We definitely will have to pay for single audit for the forthcoming years, as far as I know. Same way with C-carts. The standard audit is one price, and the single audit is a separate if that's needed. So I am recommending that we accept Baker Tilly's proposal to do the audit for fiscal year 23 and up through the next 5 years.
Thank you, Michelle. Go ahead, Bruce.
Wasn't it Martin Hood that did the last one?
Yes.
Is there any reason why they didn't bid?
Almost all of the audit firms that replied back to us as to why they didn't bid, and some did, some didn't, but in Martin Hood's case, they definitely did tell us why. In the accounting profession, everywhere, there's a shortage of people to do the work. And when it comes down to it, you know, you can only do so much work with the people you have.
We don't pay enough. Just wondered.
Well, we ask for proposals and they provide us with a number, so it's not that we don't pay enough, it's they probably doesn't think it's going to work. All right, any other additional questions on this item? Margaret, go ahead. Turn your mic on, Mike.
Sorry about that. I have been searching, I don't know how much money are we talking about here?
It is going to be between $40,000 and $50,000 a year, depending on the services that we are required to do or choose to do on page 119 of the board packet.
Okay, I see. So right now, so we're not approving a specific amount of money. We're approving a range.
Yeah, it's basically a menu of services that we either will be required to have or will choose to have.
Well, I guess I'm kind of curious as to why it's unspecified.
Well, if we decide to just do a standard audit, it'll be $35,000.
Okay.
C-cart standard audit for fiscal year 23 will be $2,000. We will have to do a single audit. If that's only for federal money that we use for capital, that'll be $7,500. If we use federal money for both capital and operating, that'll be instead $13,500. So that's why it just depends on what happens during the years, what services we're required to have.
So Margaret, we know that this year for FY23, the first column We are doing a standard audit for $35,000, and we're doing a capital-only single audit. So we know what the FY23 number is going to be. That is within the managing director's spending authority, and so technically speaking, we don't need to bring this to you for action, but if you forecast out 5 years from now at the end of this agreement, that total annual amount spent on the audit, even if we do just a standard and a single audit, which we know we'll have to do those two things, that will exceed $50,000, which is my spending authority. So 5 years from now, we'll exceed staff spending authority unless there's an adjustment to the spending authority. And so we're just covering our bases and being transparent and bringing this to you to approve. We've already signed a letter of intent for FY23, and Baker Tilly, they've already got the green light to go for FY23.
But as I understood Michelle to say that she really would like the comprehensive, sort of the enhanced version or whatever you might want to call it. Whose decision will that be to make? Yours?
Well, I don't want to do it for fiscal year '23 because it require
we're
a more
behind it already.
right. Yeah, and so if we did try to go that way, it would definitely not be a decision I would make on my own. It would be in conjunction with Carl and our comptroller, Nate Warman, and possibly the board.
Okay.
And I'd want to explain what it is, also, and the benefits of it, if we did decide to go that way.
And this doesn't get us any special consideration. It just shows that we're good people.
Yeah, the award actually, it encourages governments to go beyond, I've looked it up in case anybody asks, to go beyond the minimum requirements of generally accepted accounting principles and have very comprehensive reports. As I look through our audit, a lot of the descriptions are pretty vague, and so if we wanted to really be transparent with what those things were, we would elaborate on what some of the descriptions were. And so it just encourages transparency and full disclosure. And I think Greater Peoria Mass Transit District has done the excellence reporting before, but it's definitely not required. It's just one of those, boy, we're doing everything we possibly can, and there's a feather in our cap if we comply with their requirements.
Additional questions on this item? So the variables, to be clear, the variables are based on our operations for the year, things that might happen that might require us to do additional reporting or additional audits or additional level of audit, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. All right. I'll ask for a motion and a second to approve this contract for the auditing. It's been moved and seconded to approve the contract with Baker Tilly for 5 years for auditing, annual auditing. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now I've lost my place. I'm sorry. Our last item, action item, is the underground storage tank project change order number 3 and change order number 4.
Good afternoon, Josh Beerbaum, your Maintenance and Facilities Director. First off, I'll start, Phil, I'll put your mind at ease on the Ford situation. We did deploy 3 Chevy ADA vans, which are working flawlessly, so I'd love to make more of that transition, but the 4500s. No, I think it's a completely different chassis than an express van. It's similar to like the E450, but they have the 6.6 drivetrain in them, gas, but have worked well so far.
But just to insert a comment, we can't use federal funds to purchase those vehicles because they do not comply with Buy America. And so we had to use local funds to purchase those vehicles, to lease those vehicles.
All right, so I think Tech Services should be bringing up just a quick slideshow presentation just to show you Yep, there we are right there. So this is our diesel fuel tank, the underground installation that's going on currently. So this was approved some time back, and the project is just underway. And so far, we're making really, really good progress with it. But there are a total of 4 change orders that are going to be necessary. So if you just kind of look, this is just a photo of the site once they removed both the underground tanks. There is one of the old tanks right there laying on the concrete once it was removed. So this is just kind of the process of it. Now those tanks were, those are the 2 new tanks there. The old tanks were dual-walled steel tanks with fiberglass exteriors, weighed about 28,000 pounds each, empty. When you add fuel to it, they were about 140,000 pounds. So they were pretty heavy. These newer tanks are significantly lighter. As you can see here, these are the 2 new tanks in the ground with pea gravel around them as they're setting them. And then I think one of the last photos here, they just poured the concrete over the top of them today. So now they're fully sealed over. And this project was expected to take about 90 days to complete. They actually began on May 22nd, and they've already got, like I said, the concrete over them, which I think is one of the last pictures. But so the hope is that we will have them commissioned, should be by the end of July easily. So we're going to be well ahead of that 90-day window. Yeah, this was this morning when they had the pumper truck out, basically putting down concrete over that area. And I think after this, you're probably going to see the first change order that's going to come into play, talking about some of the conduit that we ran into issues with. In the original contract, there was an alternate in there for conduit replacement, and that conduit is essentially the conduit that runs the electrical from the fuel island into the maintenance facility. There was no way to know prior to this work beginning whether or not those conduits, new wire would just pull through them or not, so that's why this alternate was put in, thinking that likely the conduits could have to be replaced. And as they began work, it was found that the conduits did have lots of holes, were beginning to crumble, and so that conduit had to be replaced, which was your first change order on here for the $39,777. But then and that's a picture of one of the 1-inch conduits running through the ground there. You can see the hole in it. But then also too, what was also discovered, so change order number 2, the $3,600, some of the rigid conduit actually coming up between the concrete and the building, which also couldn't be seen, is corroded pretty badly. It's, yep, that photo right there. So that all needs to be replaced at the same time. And we decided to add in having them run 2 additional 1-inch conduit chases just for any future wires that would need pulled or anything additional, so that obviously if you have the conduit there, then you have the capabilities for any future work that may be needed. So that just gives you some visuals on what we're looking at for the first 2 change orders. And then on the be change order number 3. It was known at the time when the last tanks were replaced several years ago that there was some watering issues and dewatering, trying to move water to get the tanks put in the ground. We were afraid we might run into that this time also, and we did. Those old tanks that were in the ground, from the very top of the tank to grade was about 7 feet, so they were buried pretty deep, and the amount of, I mean, those tanks were sitting in water, they sat in water their entire lives pretty much. And so trying to get that water out was a challenge. Number 1, in the very beginning, they began by pumping that water out and running it out into the storm sewers and on the ground because the water was okay, it was clean. However, throughout this process, it is required to take soil samples of the site. And throughout the process of doing that, they did find some contamination. There was 18 soil samples taken. 11 of those 18 had some level of contamination. Thankfully, the level of contamination was very low, and all that's been reported. There's a 20-day and a 45-day report that had to be sent in to the IEPA, which that's been done, and we're just waiting on a NFR letter, which essentially is a no further remediation letter, meaning that we won't have to do anything additional with the soil or anything like that. My reason for bringing that up is, though, once that was identified, the water could no longer just be displaced or run through storm sewers. It had to be put into frac tanker trailers. And so we had one brought on site to hold water while they were trying to get the tanks out. One was not enough, so they had to get a second one. And even with the second one, and these are 21,000 gallon tankers each, so 42,000 gallons worth of storage, they still had to bring semis in and truck water out just to to try to keep ahead of it. And so the dewatering process was a little more than I think we expected, but we had a decent idea that could come into play. So that's change order number 3 that you see on there for the $55,206.81. And then change order number 4. So during this process, what they had anticipated about 2,800 square foot of concrete to be replaced that had to be torn out, and then about 5 feet on all sides of the tanks. That's what was expected. And during the process, they had to actually bring a bigger tractor in to pull the tanks out of the ground, not only because of the weight of the tanks, but with the water, trying to break the suction, getting the tanks out of the ground required larger equipment. And some of the concrete in that process was broken apart and started to crumble. And so there is some additional concrete work that's going to also be needed there too, and you'll see that at the very bottom, change order 4, which is $71,654. And I think that pretty much explains it, unless there's any additional questions on any of that.
Questions? Go ahead. Phil.
Just to wrap my head around the conduit situation, so you've got like a polyethylene conduit underground, and then you're using rigid metal conduit as your risers.
Yes.
And we're replacing both the polyethylene and the RMC?
That's correct.
I mean, normally the PE conduit shouldn't crumble, so do you think they maybe hit that with the excavator when they were working, or?
What was in the ground originally was steel conduit. It
All the way?
Plastic. I'm sorry.
Everything was steel?
Yes, that's correct.
So we replaced it with, for the RMC, for the riser, did you put aluminum in this time, or did we go back with galvanized?
I don't know the specifics of that. I would have to find out.
Might be something to kick around just because we don't want it to rot out again, although the aluminum might with the amount of salt we're putting out, who knows. Do you think they bear any responsibility for the damage to the pavement? I mean, with the machines, it should have been somewhat foreseeable. If you undermine the pavement and then put a hi-ho on it, you're going to tear up the pavement.
Yeah, actually, Carl and I went out and we walked the site and looked at it. Now, part of this also, too, in that concrete, that's so it's 3,700 square feet of additional concrete. About 1,200 of that 3,700 is an asphalt strip that is out there in that area that realistically, I don't know if we even know why it has been there.
And really, that'd be good to get filled in anyway.
It would be nice to pull that out anyway, but that wasn't originally included. And we weren't going to do it, but part of the issue that they had found was from one side of that asphalt to the other side, there was a dip or a valley right in the middle of it, and it butts up right next to this new concrete. And so to try to grade and get that water to shed, they would have had to put a valley in our brand new concrete. It just made no sense. So that kind of moved that project cost up a little bit. But yeah, looking at it, I think it's hard to point the finger at them for that. They tried using a smaller tractor and had to bring a bigger one in just to get the machine or the tanks picked up.
In addition to that, there wasn't rebar in the old concrete in that area like we expected. Don't know why it was done 30 plus years ago, but there wasn't rebar in it. That's not this contractor's fault. They didn't do the work. They had nothing to do with it.
Maybe they were anticipating pulling the tanks at some point too.
They had to bring the equipment in to pull the tanks up. I mean, they had to get the tanks up, and doing that on concrete that didn't have rebar that we expected to be there caused that concrete to break into pieces.
Yeah, it's almost got like a keywayed like slip plate in between the concrete, which is really odd. And even the contractor said that was kind of odd for a facility like ours that has, heavy equipment driving across it. So that was part of it. And again, they tried to use smaller equipment, and they absolutely had to stop, bring bigger equipment in to pick it up. So I think they made an effort to not damage the concrete, but unfortunately it did in the end.
Additional questions on these change orders?
I'm concerned about the leakage from these things. It seems to me that is that a tank of any kind of enclosure around these? I noticed they were sitting in something that was square. Was that a complete concrete box?
No, and actually, as a matter of fact, where they found the contamination wasn't where the tanks are. That area came back fine. Where they found the contamination was in the fuel island. So if you're familiar with our facility where the buses actually pull in and they dispense fuel, which is several hundred feet away from where the tanks are, that's where they found it. And it's most likely just from years and years and years of fueling in that area. That fuel island's been used for over 30 years. So yeah, there were actually, the soil samples from the tank area came back okay.
Right. And is there any monitoring of any possibility of leak?
Yes.
It goes under the tank somewhere? Thank you.
Yep.
I also
Go ahead.
would be, I mean, this site has a heavy history of industrial use with the trains, and it was a depot for 100 years, so the contamination might not have even been from our use, but my understanding is every new tank has to be a double layer tank, and it has to have a monitor inside the outer layer. So you've got a second tank sort of in the way when you detect leakage, I think.
Yeah, there's your exterior tank, and then you have, there's an inner and an exterior tank, and there's monitoring between those tanks and outside of those tanks. So anytime there's any detectable leak at all, it will pick that up. But the contamination they found was BETX and PNA compounds, which I'm not an engineer, but that was what was found in the soil samples that were detected.
And I just want to say one thing to be really clear. The old tanks were beyond their useful lifespan. One of them had begun to leak, but it had not leaked from the external tank. It had only leaked from the internal tank to the external tank. So there was at no time yet, which is why we did the replacement when we did, where we were leaking diesel fuel from the tank into the ground. So the system worked the way that it should, and we got the full lifespan out of the old tanks, and that's why we put new tanks in.
Can we use any of that surface? I saw you poured it over, what, 37,000 square feet, you said?
We do use that. That's all drive lane for our buses. We constantly are moving our vehicles around there. During construction, we're very hampered in our vehicle movement. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's 10-inch concrete, yeah, when they've run rebar every which direction, so it's stronger than it ever has been. Yeah.
What are we doing for fuel right now while we don't have these tanks? I probably have heard the answer to this already, but it doesn't pop into my head right now.
Yeah, so we have two above-ground 3,500-gallon tanks right now that we're utilizing for fueling during the time the USTs are down. And that's why we scheduled this for the summertime, because our fuel consumption is drastically lower in the summer, so, yep.
Thank you. Additional questions on these two change orders? Seeing none, we'll ask for a motion and a second. It's been moved and seconded to approve change order number 3 and change order number 4. Change order number 3 in the amount of $55,206.81 and change order 4 in the amount of $71,654. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. That is our last action item. Our next meeting, thank you, our next meeting will be July 26th, 2023 at 3 p.m. right here in the Illinois Terminal. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. So moved. And let's vote on that. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.